Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I hope you'll excuse the paint spattered t-shirt. I'm getting back into doing my paintings again, so gotta wear something like this because I'm bound to get more paint on it. Anyway, this video is going to be another in my Stephen King series, and again from the new collection, You Like It Darker. Almost done. After this video, I'll have 2 more stories to cover, and we'll be done with this book. So, the next story that I come across is Rattlesnakes. Now, Rattlesnakes is described as a sequel to Cujo. Of course, Cujo doesn't come back. He's dead. I mean, in a Stephen King story, he could come back, but that's not what happens here. What it does involve from Cujo is one of the main characters, Vic. He's old and he's vacationing in Florida for the summer. And if you haven't read at least Cujo, there's actually 2 books that I would suggest making sure you've read before you read Rattlesnakes. And that kind of, it puts a damper on, anybody who hasn't read much of any Stephen King grabbing this book and reading it, because the story refers a lot to Cujo and the events that happened in Cujo, and of course includes one of the main characters from Cujo, Vic. But it also refers over to Duma Key, because the story takes place at Rattlesnake Key, which is where there was a bridge going across to Duma Key in the novel Duma Key. So if you haven't, I mean, you could get by reading Rattlesnakes without reading Duma Key, I think. Though personally, I wouldn't advise it. I feel the story is made much richer by the fact that I've read both Cujo and Duma Key previously. Now, I scrambled and read Cujo before reading Rattlesnakes because of the fact that Rattlesnakes is billed as a direct sequel to Cujo. And I'm glad I did that because, number one, Cujo was a really excellent book. And number two, I think I would have been lost on a lot of things in Rattlesnakes without reading Cujo. But there are also certain things I would have been lost with if I hadn't read Duma Key, which I did read Duma Key. Was it last year or the year before? It's been a little while now, but I have already read, and I've got a video on here, a video review of Duma Key, if you're interested. And I just recently put up my video review of Cujo, of course, if you're interested in that. So, so yeah, my advice really, if you really want to know what's going on with Rattlesnakes, don't bother with You Like It Darker at all until you've read at least Cujo, but preferably both Cujo and Duma Key. You can read the rest of the stories in You Like It Darker without reading, and just skip Rattlesnakes, but I don't know. I'm happy the way I did it, where I had already previously read Duma Key, and then I quick read Cujo before Rattlesnakes, and the rest of the collection you can read without having read previous King works. But I really think, Rattlesnakes is about 100 pages long. It's a big chunk of the book. So I really think that I could not recommend people reading You Like It Darker if they haven't at least read Cujo. So anyway, for those of you who have read Cujo, I'm not going to do spoilers here. I'm going to keep it clean of spoilers. But for those of you who have read Cujo, you'll probably get a lot more out of this review than those who haven't. But you have the main character, Vic. He's old now. He's in his 70s, and he's vacationing in Rattlesnake Key in Florida, which is, I believe, an imaginary place. And it's named for the fact that the woman who lives in the house next door to where Vic is staying, he's staying in a friend's house for the summer. The woman who lives next door to him, when she was young, um, she had two boys, and those two boys got out of the yard and went into a field near the beach and stumbled onto a rattlesnake pit and got bitten to death. Okay, that's not a spoiler. That's early on in the story, and it's key to understanding then why Vic's neighbor is walking around with a stroller that has clean clothes laid out in it as if there are two kids laying in the stroller, and she's talking to them as she walks. And of course, Vic talks to other people and they agree with him. The woman is just off her rocker. But Vic, being a nice guy, he is nice to his neighbor and he kind of goes along with her fantasy. And he even does talk to the two boys a couple times, just basically humoring her. Well, then the neighbor dies of a heart attack on the walk in front of in front of Vic's place, and he calls it into 911. And it turns out she has no relatives or anything. So she leaves everything she has to Vic. He doesn't really want it, but she did it. And then all of a sudden, the stroller, which had been placed in his neighbor's garage, mysteriously shows up outside his house. And that's when the fun starts. Now, Cujo is not a supernatural horror novel. Cujo is all about a very natural horror, a very big Saint Bernard getting rabies and, terrorizing people. This one is supernatural. These boys were killed years before, but they start haunting Vic as they've haunted their mother for years. I'm not going to say any more than that about the plot of the story. You got to read it yourself. It's an excellent, excellent story. Very glad for reading it. I think it very well could have been written without the ties to Cujo and Duma Key, but it's made even better for the fact that it's revisiting these things that I've enjoyed in other books. But otherwise, it's really more of a ghost story, more of a haunting story, more of a possession story, and different from both Duma Key and Cujo in the type of horror that it is. I thought it was really excellent. Not excellent to give it a top tail, but I definitely, if you love modern horror, I think you're gonna. I'm gonna guess that you may very well love Rattlesnakes. It's an excellent story. Other writers would love to write a story this good. For King, it's not his very best, but that's because King is such an excellent writer of this kind of story. So that's the next installment in my You Like It Darker coverage. Coming up next is The Dreamers. Now, in my overall King bibliography, of course, we're way towards the end. Rattlesnakes is number 256 out of 258, and The Dreamers will be 257. So I hope you'll come back for that. In the meantime, if you've got comments about Rattlesnakes, have you read it? Leave the comments. Please don't spoil it for other people. Lots of people, I'm sure, have not yet read this story. But otherwise, leave your comments. I want to know what you think of the story. And come on back for more. Come on back for The Dreamers. And of course, I'll be going backwards and getting back into early King very soon. I've just got The Dreamers and The Answer Man to get through. And then I'm going to get back on track going back to where I was at in King's bibliography. And of course, we're doing lots of other reviews here on Telltale Books of a wide variety of great books. I hope you'll join us for that.